ready to build resiliency, create a healthy lifestyle, and overcome adversity with a warrior mindset. This is Define the Fight with Mariah Prussia.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, on this fine Monday morning. Well, minus the sun, but you know what? It might be popping up here when we're talking to Jim, because you know what? That's what it's all about. When you have guests that come on, that bring the light, that bring the resilience, that's what it's all about, is defining the fight. And I am so grateful for my upcoming guest, because I went through and committed a long period of time, which felt very, very short, to increasing, enhancing how I looked at myself, but then also how I showed up for others. And Jim continues to do that as an executive coach. He does his best in regards to helping executives and entrepreneurs step into their best self personally and professionally. He establishes trust and rapport and insight, and I have experienced that wholeheartedly, hands-on. But not only that, he has formerly been a Fortune 500 C-suite executive, along with the CEO for Unbeatable Minds and Seal Fit Company, along with he ran one of the top franchises of peak performance strategies for Tony Robbins. Now, if that lineup and those accolades don't say something, then man, you know what? You need to read up, because right now, Jim Bro is going to bring the heat today. And Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mariah, great to see you.
You as well, man. It's been a while, a long while.
Yeah, it's been a minute. It's been a minute.
You know, I've been looking around and doing clearly different things in my life as you have. But I can tell you one thing is the tribe, right? When you try to find your tribe, your pack, who you're going to be rolling with, I really do miss that connection with the higher level of frequency and those who are like driven just to persevere and keep climbing that mountain. So tell me a little bit more about what you've been doing. I mean, clearly you're working with a lot of individuals, but catch me up what you've been doing for the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, watching our grandchildren, first of all.
Yeah.
We have 6 grandchildren, and I taught them to wrestle, and they're starting to use my own moves on me. So they're getting my fingers locked and a little jujitsu. So I can't do 6-on-1 anymore. But going back to school to get my doctorate in psychology, because as I started doing a lot of the coaching, I saw that a lot of people, I think, really needed therapy, but they didn't want to call it therapy. Or even at C levels, people are super smart. Where they tend to struggle is in the emotional realm and in the relationship realm. So I'm about halfway through my doctorate, 4 years, and then do a lot of coaching. But we do some coaching one-on-one, but then also in teams. So part of what I do, which aligns exactly with what you do, Mariah, is I run physical training, or PT, 6 days a week. Still, I've been doing it for, almost 4 years now. And we start out with 20 minutes of mind gym practice, which is kind of what it sounds like. You train your mind for 20 minutes. And most people will physically train, but they don't train their mindset in the same way. So we do that for 20 minutes. And then we do training that, works on strength, mobility, but also mindset and teamwork. So we make sure people are communicating well, because when people get stressed, they generally do one of 3 things. They either become a victim, like, why, I can't do this, I'm no good, I don't belong here. Or they make it about someone else. Oh, this person's too tough. Or they ramble it and they get through it, but they get through it by themselves, and they don't really think about anyone else, or they don't look at anyone else. So we really encourage people to train with the team, with the mindset of how's everyone else doing, not just how am I doing. And then use breath work, use mindset training to get them through whatever it is. And so maybe we do, like someone said the other day, said, I hate windshield wipers. These are, you lie on your back and you kind of put your legs together from 6 to 3 o'clock, or 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, kind of back and forth. She said, oh, I hate windshield wipers. I said, oh, great. Then we'll only do 50. And so we did 50. And then she goes, oh, that's great. She said, those are so much fun. Let's do another 50. And so we kind of use humor, but, for most people, like, really, you're going to do 100 of those? That's just the warm up. We didn't even really start. But then, that person builds that confidence, like, wow, I didn't think I could do that. And of course, retrained. It's not their first day. They've been doing it for years. But then they build that belief system of, oh, I could do that. What, where else might I be holding myself back? So, yeah, I get to study and play and train, and I have clients, in Africa and Australia, of course, in the U.S. And so it's really a privilege to kind of be invited into their mind, because some of that's very intimate in a sense, where people are talking about, what are they worried about, what are they afraid of, because especially in entrepreneurs, they don't have other people to talk to, really. And if you're in a corporate executive, you don't have anyone to talk to, because you can't talk to your own people, your own employees. And even there, a lot of times people have to be a little bit guarded about what they say and who they say it to, because it can be very political.
Well, and one thing that you
So
had
yeah,
stated in the past with working with you, Jim, too, is we all need a coach. It doesn't matter what level or where you're at. We all need an individual where we can bounce things off. And, depending on where you're sitting in your life, when you're talking about executives, yeah, it's reaching back to, I shouldn't say reaching back, but reaching to employees, right? You're typically, okay, we're establishing healthy boundaries here where I just really don't want to allow you in. But, to be able for them to give you the key and say, okay, Jim, I am ready for you to unlock some of this so that I can grow. And that is a scary place to be, is allowing somebody in on a deeper level so that they actually can grow and improve on how they show up each day.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right, Mariah. It can be scary. At the same time, one of the things I do is normalize it for people. So most people that I work with at very senior levels, there's some touch of I'm not good enough. What you call it, imposter syndrome, or whatever you call it. So how it manifests is then it's over preparation. They're kind of never enough, and their mind's going 100 miles an hour. So they tend to not be in the present too much. They're in the future, which can work at times if you have to be strategic and think about the future. Where it doesn't work is in relationships, when you're thinking about work or you're not present, or if you're always in the future, then people tend to have trouble sleeping because their mind's going 100 miles an hour. And people are generally really good at going 0 to 100 and really lousy at going from 100 to 0. So they don't rest, and therefore that causes problems. And then they do what they do. They drink a lot of caffeine, and they drink alcohol at night, and then they get heavier, and then they don't have time, or they're taking a new job. And so, everything they used to do, now they have to do it. What people try to do is they do it harder and longer until that doesn't work. Right? They go, I'm just going to do the same job, but I'm going to go harder and longer. Well, you're still a human, and especially if they're flying across time zones and in different continents, they get exhausted. And at some point, something breaks, and then they're like, okay, let's try that again, because what you're doing isn't working. But to normalize that for people and go, hey, and that's where the insight comes in, either you're experiencing this or this is something you may run into. And so, people have gotten bloody noses and black eyes before. You don't have to get all of them. Let's try to avoid a couple of those.
Well, it's step by step, and I've been in that spot. And sometimes I reflect back and I'm like, okay, hold on, what can I let go of? And I think that's a big thing, is when we are so used to navigating life in a way where its foot is on the accelerator. Sometimes what we have to do is either A, take it off cruise, or hit the brake, so that we can have that little pit stop by the side of the road and say, hold on here, something isn't working. And one thing that I did learn in regards to the unbeatable mind is the fact of, if you're trying to say that this is your why, and you're identifying that, okay, this is what I'm working towards and why I'm working towards it, but the structure isn't in alignment with what you're trying to do, then you need to change the structure. And I think that's the hardest piece for most people is, okay, I have to break down this structure and rebuild it so it's more conducive to the life that I want to lead.
Exactly. That's a great point, Mariah. So what a lot of people do is they look at themselves, right? The I.
Yep.
Or they look at somebody else, the team, whatever that is. Could be your work team, could be your family. Or as you say, the structure, the system. What system are you in? And so when you want to make a change, it's smart to look at all three of those. Like, what can you control and shift and change? And then how does your team or family support you or thwart you? Or what kind of conversations do you want to have? And that is, hey, I've got to say what I want, and we've got to talk about boundaries. We have to talk about communication. And then role identities can come into play. And there's a lot of people struggle with handling those conversations well. And then what's the system that you've set up, the processes, the rules, the schedules, and are they helpful or not helpful? And so to look at all three of those areas is good. Most executives, if you will, or entrepreneurs, they're very good at systems and processes. What are the resources? How much are you going to spend in different things? What systems do you need? They tend not to look at teams unless there's a problem. Or even if they do, it's like, okay, you bring in your organization development group and they do an intervention for a couple days or a couple weeks, which is good, but then they leave. So how do you keep that up? So you have an idea, but then how do you implement it?
How's it sustainable? Prior to going into the break, we spoke about understanding and looking at the why and the structure, but now we're going to dive into aligning your values with your actions. So Jim Breaux is back with us, and I know you have worked with a variety of different executives and entrepreneurs. How does one work on aligning their values through their actions?
Yeah, well, Gandhi said, happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in alignment. And so, first of all, I work with people to help them define, what do you value? What's important to you? What are your priorities? And generally, when people take a job, there's some compromise, right? It's not exactly everything they want, nor necessarily should it be. But what are those things that are important to you? And then what do you do about them? So for example, and I do this sometimes, like you make a pie chart and you say, all right, what are your top things, the values that are important to you? And you put that percentage of the pie based on how important it is. So they're like family, health, making a difference, career, my faith. Okay, great. Now make a second pie chart and note the amount of time you spend on each of those. And then they're like, okay, your health, that was so important. It's this like little tiny sliver of pie, and family may be very small. So when you look at where do you put your energy, where do you think, where do you invest your time? Is that in alignment with what you say your values are? Or for example, if it's in a company, you say, okay, forget what's on the posters. If we had a team of people that would follow you around, your company, follow you around for a week and note what you do and what you say and how you act and where you spend your time, what would they say your values are? Not what you tell us, but what would they say based on what you actually do? And for a lot of companies and organizations, there's a delta between what they say their values are and what they actually do. And some are embedded, we do those, and some are aspirational. We're working on them. We do value that, but we're human. So, it might be a little bit harder. So in the same way, I work with individuals to define what's important to you. And how does that show up? And where are you consistent and where are you not consistent? And then if they have a significant other in some type of relationship or have kids, if I interviewed them, and I often do, what would they say your values are? And if what they say your values are is consistent with what you say they are, at least you're consistent. Now, is that your ideal? Could be, could not be. But that's where, like, I give people a little tracker so they have their values and they say, okay, well, what would be good measurements for those values for you? You make it up yourself. And that could be, around health, for example, could be around what they eat, how they train, how they stretch, for example, how much sleep they get. And if it's connecting with other people, well, what does that look like? Are you calling people? Are you going out with them? Are you spending time? Are you going on vacations? What does it look like? So that's where I help people align their values with their actions. And for some people, even understanding what those values are is a great first step.
Well, in recognizing it, I think a lot of us don't take the time to write down where are we actually putting our time? What are our value system? We might know it in our head, but until you actually physically write it down, now you can visualize it better than just, it's almost like when you're getting ready to go to bed and you have 850 different things on your mind, it's going to keep spinning and spinning and spinning until you write it down so you can release that. Well, now by putting down what are your values, what are those components, now you have it in front of you. And I know in my life, sometimes those pie charts shift. You know, when you're working with your clients, what do you talk to them? Where sometimes you might have a crazy hectic week. And then all of a sudden those percentages of where you're at, whether it's family, whether it's faith, whether it's exercise, sometimes there is a shift. And yes, it's taking control and being consistent, but you know, when you're traveling and shifting, how do you work with your clients on, all right, you got a tough week ahead. Let's look at where we can make some either adaptions or, hey, you're just going to dive in.
Yeah, that's a great question. A couple things. One, values don't shift much over a year. They shift more over years and decades. So there's some inflection points. So if someone retires, for example, or has a child, or gets into a relationship, or gets divorced, or splits up, or gets a new job, or moves, those can represent points where it'd be good to look at your values again. Or let's say kids leave the nest and you have an empty nest syndrome. Now, how do you define you, right? How do you define you? What's your identity now? Because if you were a mother or a father and that was a big part of your identity and you still are, but they're not around, and so you don't have that as much interaction, what is it for you now? So that's one, to look at those and see if they're consistent over time. But in the shorter time frame, Mariah, that you talked about, I like the idea of an accordion. So an accordion, of course, can expand and then contract, but it never goes to nothing, right? So if you push I don't know what those are called, the little flapper things,
I don't either, man. Just roll with it.
I don't even know. Yeah. So if you push them all the way in, there's still something that holds it. So there's some baseline level of activity. So for example, if you're traveling and you're like, oh, I really value health, then what's the minimum amount you're going to do no matter what? Right? So yeah, you may not be at your gym. You don't have all the stuff you normally do, or you don't have time. You've got to be somewhere early or meet people before and after you're going out. And, but okay, maybe you don't train for 2 hours, but maybe you train for 15 minutes. And so what's that minimum daily input that you're going to do for that value? And around connection, maybe you don't have 30 minutes to talk to your mother on the phone, but can you text and say, yeah, I was thinking about you? That might be something that a person does. So it's a great question. So as people get really busy, then we look at what are you doing at a minimum, for that time.
So you're making
over time.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're just saying you're making adjustments. You make adjustments, but it never completely goes down to 0%. It's just making sure that, hey, okay, I know mentally that this is going to be the shift that's coming up. So we're back here with Jim, and we're going to be talking about what does that look like, creating a new identity. So Jim, what does that look like for you? Because I'm assuming throughout your lifetime, you've gone through different transitional moments in your life where it's like, okay, now it's time for a new identity, working and hanging out and playing with your grandkids is clearly one of them. But what does that look like from your point of view?
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's a guy named Eric Erickson who came up with this stages of development in 1950. And one for adolescents, and if you have kids, you know this, one is called identity versus role confusion. So when kids are adolescents, they're like, well, what do I like? What group do I fit into? And you see some changing. People change how they dress, maybe how their hair is. They might be in sports or activities at school, or they don't like school. And then if they go to college or the service or whatever they do, then they have a sense of, well, what's the role? What identity do I want? And then later on in life, probably more my stage, is generativity versus stagnation. Who are you? Do you matter anymore? So if you're not in the role that you were in before, and there's some ego that comes with that, of salary, office, whatever, now you're not that. You don't do that anymore. So now who are you? And are you just going to kind of wither away? And you see so many people who retire and then just they die fairly soon after that because they don't really have a purpose anymore. So, but also when you create a new identity, there's other things that are linked to that. So for example, if you have a job, you have a habit, you show up, at a certain time, you wear certain clothing, you engage with different people, and you have certain beliefs, like to do well, I must do this. If I want to do well, then I do this. Great. Now you're in a new game. You no longer go to work, for example, or your kids aren't around, or you're starting a new career. What are the rules now? What are your beliefs around those rules? Like when you let go, there's a lot of beliefs that aren't really conscious for people. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I know, like for myself, where I'm currently at, I'm getting closer towards that 50 range compared to where I was. But what I'm finding within my own life is some of that my fight is changing, where it's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm moving closer and closer into a more defined purpose. And maybe that's what the challenge is because I'm used to having 7 or 8 different roles all going at the same time, where now it's honing in and it's shifting and it's narrowing that focus, which is great. And I need that because I know you know me very well, Jim. It's like, all these different things.
Yeah.
But it's okay. So let that go, Mariah. And it's okay to let that go. But then I wouldn't identify it as fear because I recognize the need to let go of some things. But at the same point, it's like, but that's who I've been. So now it's like, this is different. This is different. And it becomes challenging.
Yeah, very challenging because who are you now? Or, you ask yourself, who am I now? I work with people. I'm going to be 62 here in a little bit. And I work with a lot of people who in their 50s or 60s now start having injuries. Our good friend, we remain nameless, is getting his total knee replacement today in his 40s. So, okay, what does that mean? So if you're an athlete and all of a sudden now you have a artificial joint, then you're not going to do what you're doing before probably, or you may not want to. So now what? But if your belief is, for me to be fill in the blank, tough, a man, a woman, I have to be able to do this, and now you can't. Okay, now what does that do to your identity? Or for me to be in this role as a mother, a father, a CEO, then I do this, and that shifts. Now what? So you can go and look at your beliefs, you can look at your values, you can look at your identity, and then what are your habits? Because your habits are going to be different if you no longer go into the office, or even think about if you used to go into the office or go to your workplace and all of a sudden COVID happens and you're working from home every day. Woof, that's a lot. Like just the social change is different. Everyone liked it for the first little bit. Right. Then after a while, like that can be isolating. So there's a lot that goes into it. And most people just kind of, sweep it under the rug. They're like, we'll just watch TV or scroll or I'll have a drink. And they don't really think about it. But there's that kind of unease and distress and even, some levels of depression that can creep in. But people don't really know why, because they don't know how to ask the right questions. They don't have a framework. They're just like, something's bugging me, but I don't really know. But if you kind of understand stages of development or changes and how people can respond, then I think it's a little bit easier to start poking away at that and having some insight to it.
What would you say are a couple of action items that individuals can do? So when individuals step away from one purpose, right? Some of that purpose is clearly still pouring into that pitcher, right? But now moving into a larger picture or a different one where there's something new that's coming in and it's not quite at the point of full fruition, what are some action items that can help them mentally, make that shift? Because I know I've got a lot of different friends right now that are going through different major changes within their life where A, it might be a new profession, or B, they've been working extremely hard. And let's just say for the last year or two where it's like they're putting all of their eggs in that basket and they're pushing and pushing and pushing. But then there's points of self-sabotage of like, man, when is this going to come into play? What are some key things that they can do to help them, mentally, or just, hey, stay focused, keep moving forward, right? So they have that wind still behind their sail.
Yeah, really good question. So a few things. As they move from one thing to another, if you're listening and this is you, as you move from one thing to another, what did you really like about that old thing? What gave you joy? If you think back and go, well, what was a really special memory of that time? What did you really like? And so that will give you some sense of value, things you value. And then to what extent do you have that in this new role or this new position? And if it's not there, or it's not there to the same extent, how can you make that up? Right? How can you make that up somewhere else? So one is understand what you liked about the old role, because there's part of it, and how can you bring that into the new role? Another thing that could be helpful is, what are your beliefs? What do you have to believe in order for you to enjoy this new role, this new time, this new identity? And another is kind of, how do you think about change? What has to happen for you to make a change? A lot of people are used to being, I see this all the time, Mariah, they're kind of 10 out of 10, even the way they set goals. They're like, okay, I want to stretch. I'm not that flexible. I want to stretch. And so they go, I'm going to stretch 30 minutes a day. Great. How much do you now? 0. Okay. All right. You're not going to do 30 minutes a day if you're starting with 0. And so what people are thinking about is, I've got to be 10 out of 10 in everything, or I do nothing. And I see it all the time. They set these goals that are so high because they have to be an A+ student or a 10 out of 10. And if they can't meet that, which generally they can't because there's just too much, then they do 0, because they're like, well, if I can't work out for an hour, I'm not going to do anything. So part of when you shift into a new role, there's probably a piece that you're learning. And so look at the yardstick you're using. If you're looking at the yardstick of, I did something for 30 years and now this is the first 10 minutes I'm doing something, you're not going to be a 10 out of 10. Allow yourself to learn and enjoy the process. And, maybe you're a 4 out of 10 right now, but you're probably not a 0. So great. What made you a 4 and not a 0 or a 1? And then what would it take for you to get to a 5? So that's where, and Mariah, the idea of micro goals comes in.
Yeah.
So when you're in a new identity, give yourself a little grace, give yourself some time, because we think just because we were doing something at a super high level before that we're going to go and, we're going to hit the ground running. I mean, in some ways you do because you have life experience, but in a lot of other ways you haven't done it. Like when I went back to school, I'm taking courses, but I haven't gone to school like that like 40 years. I was like,
here we go, right? Here we go.
Things have changed a little.
Yeah. Well, it's the mentality of it's not going from 0 to hero. And when you're talking about 10 for 10, there isn't such a thing as being perfect. And I think we get in that mindset that we have to be perfect, or, reaching when we're talking about the mountains, where are you sitting? Are you sitting at a 10? And, that was a big reflecting point for me is at one point thought I was close to a 10 in one of the areas. And the reality is we never really hit a 10, or we think that we do. But if you're a 10 out of 10, well, then all you're stating at this point is that you're limiting your growth, because at the end of the day, as you climb the mountain in life, and you stand on that peak of the mountain, you're going to look left, you're going to look right, And man, it's amazing view when you're there. But if you want to stay
Yeah.
there, you're going to start seeing, different phases of growth from everybody else rising up that and passing you. But then there's also a false summit. There's always another mountain to climb. So, Jim, you have so many different things that are going on in your world, in your basket, that you are sharing with others through acts of service. But one of them is you are the author of Easy Makes Us Weak. Now, I'm really interested.
Easy makes us weak.
Easy makes us weak. You know what? So right now, if you're taking it easy, chilling on your couch cushion has, now has dents in it, like permadents. It's important to make sure that you are getting up off that couch, change the cushion, get moving. So let's dive into what made you push through and this is really what it's about in regards to writing your book.
Yeah. So thanks for asking. I was in something called Kokoro, which is kind of a Navy SEAL, a civilian version of Navy SEALs Hell Week. So you stay up for 50 hours, nonstop training. And, we started, I was a month shy of 55 at the time. And most of the people were in, teenagers in the 20s. A couple guys just turned 40. So anyway, we started out, and after, about 15 hours, there were only 3 of us left. And a lot of guys said they want to be SEALs, and they dropped. The 3 of us graduated. One guy was 18 at the time, one guy was 21, and now they're both Navy SEALs. One's on Team 8 and one's on Team 2. And retired Navy SEAL Commander Mark Devine was talking to us kind of near the end, and we knew what was happening. They have us do yoga, they have us sit down, and then they start yelling at us and throwing water, and you can't do anything right. But those were his words. He said, "Easy makes us weak." And so how do you challenge yourself? How do you continue to challenge yourself? And a lot of people think it's like all about me, like how tough can I be? And one of the things we learn in those SEAL Fit training, and I hope to kind of perpetuate and help people with, is, you have to do your work and show up like you do, Mariah. But how tough you are goes out the window really fast. Like nobody really cares. Like, yes, so you can do your job, but really, how can you help other people? It's really about service. And so what do you need to do to help serve others? And so that's where, it's not easy to say you're sorry. It's not easy to look back and go, well, where could I have been wrong? Or where could I have been more open to someone else? Or even from a physical sense, which in some way it can be hard, but it's straightforward. Like, keep going. Don't ever quit. I remember a guy who said he wanted to be a SEAL, and in the MRF, where, run a mile, you do a bunch of stuff, and then you run another mile, he was walking. I'm like, dude, you're a Division I athlete and you're walking during MRF. Come on, you can run. Like, unless you're injured, you can run no matter what. And so when we don't give it our all, when we stop, when we walk instead of run, then we don't even believe ourselves. We don't even have confidence in ourselves, because we know, okay, next time it gets hard, I'm going to quit. But when you don't, when you go, no matter what, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep putting one foot in front of another. I get knocked down, but I get back up. I'm going to go, all right, who else can I ask? Can I go around? Can I go under? Can I go through? Can I, do it a different way? If you're committed to the outcome, and you then ask a different question and you keep going. So that's where, when you challenge yourself, and that can be whatever you want. It could be, getting 8 hours sleep for a month. That could be a challenge, right? Because you're just not recovering. Or it could be, training in a certain way, or doing ice baths, or going to a crucible, or meditating, or doing emotional work. For a lot of people, especially guys, they would rather do, 1,000 burpees than some emotional work. But in the emotional work, that's where they're really going to grow, right? So I think people can look at that and they might think of it in a physical sense only, but I would say physical sense can help you grow in these other areas, especially mentally and emotionally, and kind of in that connection to other people. So that's why I wrote the book. It was my experience going through Kokoro and then kind of being on the other side. because then I got hired as the COO and then eventually CEO of Unbeatable Mind and SealFit. So I think I was in 18 different SealFit crucibles, and kind of got to help out with the team guys who were the instructors. So that was a lot of fun.
Well, it gives you a great view too, because you've been there, you've done that, you know exactly where everyone's mind is heading to when they're going through the crucible. And then you're able to say, okay, hey, how can I connect with this individual to help them be successful to cross that finish line? In regards to individuals quitting, I think it's very easy to give up or become complacent in life, where sometimes we just have to look at, okay, hold on, why am I giving up? Why am I quitting? And then, okay, let me change that dialogue, because you know what? At the end of the day, sometimes when we're doing our own workouts, our personal work, it's recognizing that, yes, other people may not know if you give up, but the reality is what should be most important is you know that you gave up. Right? So that's the key thing. Jim, you do a variety of different services. And before we wrap up here, I would really like to have you share, how can individuals get in contact with you if they're looking for coaching, looking for your book? What is your website? That kind of breakdown. So how can individuals research you?
Yeah. So Jim at jimbro.com. Last name is spelled BRAULT. So not like it sounds. Jim at jimbro.com, and the website is jimbro.com. So I do coaching for people. We do team coaching where we have groups of 6 people and we get together. We do PT, physical training. I also have an app called the Mind Gym where people can go in and train. We have, I think, 149 different training sessions where people can develop that inner voice and do that Mind Gym work that we talked about before. So happy to help if it makes sense for you.
Awesome. I appreciate you so much for coming on the show, Jim. But then also,
great to be here.
But then also showing and sharing with others how they can grow within their own life. So if you guys are looking for ways to enhance your life mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, check out Jim Bro, because you know what? At the end of the day, we are in this fight together. So you know what? Go out, knock out your Monday, and go out and define the fight.